My wife said, "Cheers, we're divorcing," already celebrating online. I handed her the keys and said, "Good luck tomorrow." The next morning, her phone went dead. She went to the bank, and the manager refused to even speak to her until the primary signatory arrived. When she saw who walked in, she froze. Her name was Serena, and she had been planning that moment for longer than I had realized. We had been married for 18 years. 18 years is not a number. It is a texture. It is the smell of coffee at 6 in the morning before anyone speaks. It is the shorthand you develop for arguments you have stopped finishing because you already know how they end. It is the particular way a person sighs when they think you are not listening. I knew every layer of that woman. Or I thought I did. The truth is that somewhere around year 15, she stopped being the person I had actually married, and I had been too loyal to my memory of her to register the difference. I still remembered the woman I met at a rest stop outside of Flagstaff, Arizona. Green sneakers, a paper cup of gas station coffee she was drinking like it was perfectly acceptable. She was telling a stranger about a 3-legged dog she had driven 40 miles out of her way to bring to a rescue shelter, laughing about it like it was the funniest thing that had ever happened to her. That woman cared about real things. She cared about inconvenient things, about detours and strays and the kind of effort that nobody ever sees. The woman sitting across from me at our anniversary dinner cared about angles. She cared about lighting and caption timing and whether the candlelight on the table was warm enough to make her skin look good on a 4-inch screen. She had her phone propped against the water glass before our appetizers even arrived. I watched her adjust it twice. I watched her tilt her chin 45 degrees and take a photograph of herself looking pensively toward the window, as if something meaningful was happening just outside. Nothing was happening outside. It was a parking lot. When she clinked her glass against mine, she did it the way people do things when they have already rehearsed them. Clean. Practiced. She said it like a punchline delivered to a room she expected to laugh. Cheers. We are divorcing. And then she smiled at the phone, not at me. And I understood that this was content. This moment, this ending of 18 years, was content. I did not flinch. I want to be clear about that. Not because I was cold, but because I had seen this coming for long enough that the emotional work was already finished. What you see on your face in a moment like that is the residue of grief that has not yet been processed. I had processed mine on a Wednesday night 14 months earlier, sitting in my car in a parking garage, giving myself exactly 22 minutes to feel the full weight of what I already knew was coming. Then I dried my face, drove home, and started building. I reached into my blazer, and I set the house keys on the tablecloth next to her fork. Not tossed. Set. The way you leave a tip when you want the waiter to know you are being deliberate about it. 4 words came out of my mouth. Good luck tomorrow. Then I placed 2 crisp $100 bills on the table for the meal neither of us had finished, pushed my chair in quietly, nodded to the waiter on my way past, and walked out through the front door into the October air. The night smelled like turned leaves and cold pavement. Behind me, through the glass front of the restaurant, I could still hear her laughing. I did not turn around. That laugh was not for me. It was for whoever was watching. She thought she had me. She had spent months building the narrative, the public story of a free woman finally breaking out of a stale marriage. The before and after arc her audience had apparently been following without my knowledge or consent. She had her story ready. The brave departure, the champagne toast, the triumphant keys left on the table, which she later claimed on her channel were her own doing, by the way. She had no idea that in walking out that door, I had not lost a single thing I cared about keeping. See, Serena had spent the last 3 years building a narrative. I had spent the last 3 years building something else entirely. The trust was called Meridian Crest Holdings. I had formed it quietly, 42 months before that dinner, working with an estate attorney named Patricia who charged $420 an hour and was worth every cent. Patricia did not ask me why I was restructuring during a marriage. She had seen enough to know that the question was not her business. What mattered was the architecture, and the architecture we built together was airtight. Every asset we shared had been identified, valued, retitled, and repositioned. The house, a 4-bedroom colonial that had appreciated significantly since we bought it, now sat entirely within the trust structure. The studio space downtown that Serena used for filming, and which she had always referred to as her creative sanctuary, had been retitled the same way. The 2 vehicles. The retirement accounts she had never once asked to review despite 18 years of joint filing. The brokerage account she did not know existed. All of it restructured, all of it repositioned under controlling authority. And here's the part that still takes my breath away a little when I think about it. She had signed off on every single transfer herself. Serena had a habit with paperwork. She hated it. She found it tedious and beneath her creative bandwidth, which is a sentence she actually said out loud once without any apparent irony. Whenever I sent her something via electronic signature, she approved it the way people approve cookie notices on websites. Immediately, without reading, because reading was not the point. The point was for it to go away. One document, a postnuptial agreement restructuring the financial terms of our marriage, had been sent under the subject line Household Financial Updates. Standard formatting. Clean, professional language. She signed it 4 minutes after posting a video from a cliffside spa in Sedona. 4 minutes. I know the exact time because the platform logs it. She was still in the content creation high of whatever she had just filmed when she tabbed over, scrolled to the signature line, and tapped approve. That document alone, signed with her own thumb, voided every community property claim she had planned to make. Her attorney, a well-reviewed woman named Dana, who Serena had apparently retained weeks before the dinner, would later estimate the expected settlement at somewhere between $400,000 and $1.2 million. The post-nuptial agreement, duly executed and notarized, reduced that figure to 0. Serena had signed her own financial exit cheerfully, without glasses, from a daybed overlooking a canyon. She did not read a single line. The morning after the dinner, her phone went dark. Not a crash, not a carrier issue, not a billing problem. The account had been migrated to a new primary carrier under Meridian Crest the previous afternoon at 3:15. I had authorized the transfer in advance with a timed execution. Serena woke up to a phone that connected to nothing. No calls, no data, no access to the apps she needed to post. In 2024, that is not just an inconvenience. For someone whose entire identity and income stream lived on those apps, it was something closer to suffocation. Then she tried the bank. The joint checking account was the one she had used freely for years. Spa visits, boutique clothing, equipment for the studio, supplements, subscriptions, all of it charged against a balance she had never monitored because she had never needed to. Invalid password. She tried again. Invalid password. She called the customer service line and was informed by a representative reading from notations on the account that she had been removed from the account the previous afternoon at 4:47 in the evening, approximately 45 minutes after I left the restaurant. She drove to the branch in a white-knuckle state. I know this because she filmed it, or tried to. The story she had built required a villain, and she needed footage of me being unreasonable and cold so she could complete the arc. She arrived at the branch looking polished, because she never went anywhere without looking polished, but her jaw was tight and her eyes had the particular flatness of someone who has just discovered that the ground is not where they left it. Gerald was waiting. Gerald was the branch manager, a steady, careful man who had managed that location for 11 years and who had received specific documentation from Meridian Crest Holdings regarding the account status the previous morning. He met her at the counter with the practiced expression of someone who has already reviewed the situation thoroughly and has been given precise instructions about how to proceed. He told her, in a measured and professional tone, that without the primary signatory present, he was not in a position to provide any account information or access. She told him she was the account holder. He said, very politely, that she had been removed from that designation. She demanded he call me. Gerald hesitated in a way that was not nervousness. It was the hesitation of a man checking the clock, knowing that the next phase of the situation was already in motion, and that his job in this moment was simply to hold the line until it arrived. Something shifted behind his eyes. Not fear, not sympathy exactly. More like the particular expression of a man who can already see the last page of the chapter and is simply waiting for the rest of the room to catch up. That is when the front door opened. The branch had that particular quiet of a Wednesday morning. the hum of fluorescent lights, the faint sound of a printer somewhere in the back. Gerald straightened without being asked. A woman from the loan desk stood up from her chair instinctively, the way people do when the energy in a room changes. The security guard near the door gave a small, recognizing nod. I did not walk in angry. I want to be precise about that, because anger would have meant she still had power over my emotional state, and she did not. I did not walk in smug because smugness is just anger wearing a costume. I walked in wearing the navy suit I had pressed the night before, shoes polished to the kind of finish that takes 3 minutes and signals that you woke up knowing exactly what kind of day this was going to be. No wedding ring, no hesitation, no performance, just arrival. I walked past Serena without making eye contact. Not a cut, not a deliberate snub. Simply the motion of a man who has business to conduct and has conducted it before. I went directly to Gerald, who already had the clipboard ready. I signed where indicated. Gerald gave me the account summary I had requested, confirmed the transfers that had been completed, and handed me a sealed envelope containing the closing statement on the secondary savings account, which I folded and placed in the inner pocket of my jacket. Then I opened the leather binder. Serena called it my boring little bedtime reading. When we were still sharing a home and a life in any functional sense, she used to see me at the kitchen table late at night with it and shake her head. All those papers, all that organizing, she never asked what was in it. She was not interested in the infrastructure of the life she was living. She was only interested in its surface. What was in that binder was the complete picture. I set it on Gerald's counter and I began to go through it in order. Not for drama, not for her. For the record, because Patricia had advised me to establish, in a documented bank setting with a credible witness present, the full chain of asset control in the event of any subsequent legal challenge. The first section was the Meridian Crest Holdings formation documents, fully executed, dated 42 months prior. The second section was the retitling records for each property, each vehicle, each account. The third section was a chronological log of every electronic signature Serena had provided, with timestamps and IP addresses and the corresponding document names. 19 documents over 31 months, 19 approvals, 19 opportunities to read what she was signing. The fourth section was the post-nuptial agreement, her signature, her approval timestamp, the notarization, the witness attestation. I did not narrate any of this for her. I simply turned the pages in front of Gerald and let him initial each relevant section as a receiving witness. But Serena was standing 6 feet away, and Serena could read when she chose to. She was reading now. I watched it happen in her face the way you watch weather move across flat land. First the confusion, because the documents were formal and dense, and her brain was still looking for the angle she had prepared for. The angry husband, the emotional scene, the footage she could use. Then the recognition, slow and cold, as specific words and figures began to land. The trust name, the retitling dates, the account removal timestamp, her own signature repeated across page after page of decisions she had ratified without reading. She said my name once, just my name, not a question, not an accusation. More like someone saying a word in a language they have just realized they never actually spoke. I looked at her then. For the first time since I walked in, she was very still. The phone she had brought in, presumably to document my wrongdoing for her audience, was at her side, screen dark. She was not performing. For the first time in what felt like years, Serena was not performing. I said one thing. I said, Dana is going to tell you the same thing I am about to tell you, and it is going to cost you $400 an hour to hear it. So I will save you the appointment. There is nothing to contest. You signed everything voluntarily. The trust is clean. The post-nuptial is enforceable. The house has been listed as of this morning. She asked about the studio. I told her the studio lease would be honored through the end of the current term, which was 63 days. And that she was welcome to remove her personal equipment during that period by appointment. She asked about the cars. I told her the sedan in her name had been transferred back to her personal name as a courtesy, free and clear, no lien. It was the one thing I had deliberately left for her, because I am not interested in cruelty. Cruelty requires ongoing attention. I was not planning to give her any more of my attention. She stood there for a long moment. Gerald found something very important to review on his computer. The loan desk woman sat back down. The security guard looked at the window. Serena looked at me, and I think she was trying to locate the version of me that she had counted on. The version that would negotiate. The version that needed her to see him as reasonable. The version that was still hoping she would change. That version had driven away in a parking garage 14 months ago and had not come back. What happened in the weeks that followed was quieter than you might expect. Dana reviewed the documents and confirmed what I had told Serena at the counter. The post-nuptial was airtight. The trust structure was legitimate. The electronic signatures were legally binding under the state statutes that governed them. There was no fraud. There was no duress. There was a woman who had spent 3 years signing documents without reading them, and a man who had spent 3 years making sure every one of those documents was exactly what it said it was. The divorce was finalized 4 months and 11 days after that anniversary dinner. No trial, no contested hearing. The settlement reflected the post-nuptial terms exactly. Serena posted a video the week the divorce finalized. She called it my next chapter. She looked radiant. She talked about growth and freedom and knowing your own worth. The comments were full of people telling her she was brave and inspiring. She did not mention the studio she had lost. She did not mention the house she was no longer living in. She did not mention the financial framework she had signed away on a daybed in Sedona while the canyon light hit her at exactly the right angle. I did not watch it. Someone told me about it. I moved into a smaller place on the north side of the city. Hardwood floors, good light, a small yard where I was considering, for the first time in years, getting a dog. Maybe a 3-legged one. The kind that needs someone to go 40 miles out of the way. I had the time for that now. The binder went into a filing cabinet in the second bedroom. I did not need it anymore. Everything it represented had already been settled, witnessed, and closed. The trust continued to operate. The assets continued to be managed. Patricia sent a card that said simply, "Well structured." Coming from her, that was practically a standing ovation. There are people who will hear this story and call it cold, calculated. They will say that a man who spends 42 months quietly preparing for the end of a marriage must have already given up on it. Maybe they are right. Or maybe there is a version of preparation that is actually the last act of someone who loved something enough to protect what they built when the other person stopped caring about any of it. I am not sure those two things are mutually exclusive. What I know is this. She lifted a glass and called it the end. I handed her the keys and called it a transition. And when the morning came, and the phone was dark, and the account was closed, and Gerald was waiting at the counter with the practiced expression of a man who already knew how the next 5 minutes ended, the only thing left to do was walk through the door in a pressed navy suit and let 18 years arrive at the destination they had been moving toward for a very long time. I signed where indicated. I closed the binder, and I walked back out into the November light, which was cold and clear and entirely mine.